He was hired to protect her. She was forced to marry him. When heiress Lucia D'Amato is bound by contract to marry her father's ruthless bodyguard, Gerald Cross, she expects chains of duty, not desire. But what begins as a cold arrangement soon ignites into a dangerous game of secrets, lies, and forbidden chemistry. In a world where every touch can be a headline, and every kiss could cost her freedom, Lucia must decide, is Gerald her shield or her greatest threat? Mandara series, getting better every day. Lucia had been raised among power. She knew the cadence of contracts better than bedtime stories, the language of acquisitions more fluently than lullabies. But this boardroom felt different. The walls gleamed with walnut paneling, the long table polished to a mirror. The chandeliers overhead burned cold, casting sterile light on faces too serious to be trusted. Her father sat at the head of the table, his hands steepled as if this were just another quarterly decision. To him it was. To her it was everything. And across from him, leaning against the far wall, was Gerald. He did not belong to this world of tailored suits and polite poison. He was sharper, rougher, too solid to blend in with the polished veneer of executives. His shoulders filled the space with quiet dominance, his jaw clenched in restrained patience. The dark suit he wore could not soften him, it only drew attention to the soldier underneath. When he spoke, his voice cut clean through the silence. It won't be real. No emotions, no confusion, just protection. The words were matter-of-fact, final. Lucia's spine stiffened. Her throat burned with the scream she would not give him. She wanted to demand her freedom, to laugh at the absurdity of a paper marriage, to tell her father he could auction off the company but not her heart. Instead she said nothing. Stay silent. Her silence was defiance wrapped in velvet. And Gerald's eyes, storm gray and unwavering, met hers as if he saw it. The contract was signed. The deal was done. And with it, her cage was gilded anew. The world outside the boardroom was no kinder. Flashbulbs burst like lightning as they stepped onto the carpet. Reporters swarmed, their voices a frenzy of questions sharpened into accusations. Gerald's hand pressed firmly against the small of her back, guiding her forward. Not tender, not possessive, simply controlled. It was the kind of touch that carried weight, commanding compliance without words. He bent close, his breath brushing her ear. Remember, appearances. And then his lips grazed her cheek. The crowd roared, shutters snapping like machine guns. His touch lingered at her waist, fingers splayed in a way no camera could miss. Lucia tilted her head toward him, catching his eyes for a fleeting, deliberate heartbeat. Her gaze burned the question into him. Was that for them, or for you? Her smile, when it came, was flawless. The suite was grand, but the silence inside was louder than the city below. Dinner arrived on silver trays, roast lamb, asparagus, rich sauces that smelled of indulgence. Yet the table by the window felt more like a chessboard than a dinner setting. Gerald had shed his jacket, rolling his sleeves with precision. He cut his food neatly, movements efficient, almost military. Lucia toyed with her fork, appetite lost to the thrum beneath her skin. Finally she broke the silence. So that kiss. Necessary? He cut in without glancing up. Her fork clattered against the porcelain. Don't tell me what's necessary. Tell me what it was. At that his eyes lifted. Gray, steady, cutting through her like glass. Something flickered in their depths, irritation, restraint, maybe something darker, but it was gone before she could name it. We'll discuss this later, he said. Her chin lifted. Later? You don't get to steal a moment in front of the world and shut me out in private. He leaned back, arms folding across his broad chest, the lamplight catching sharp lines of muscle under cotton. His voice dropped low, dangerous. Careful, Lucia. You don't want to fight me here. But she did not flinch, did not yield. Then don't kiss me if you can't admit what it means. Silence thickened between them, heavier than the food untouched on their plates. She woke the next morning to the smell of coffee. Sunlight fractured through the curtains, cutting lines of gold across the room. Gerald stood at the counter, pouring black coffee into porcelain mugs. His tie was already knotted, his stance rigid, a man who treated routine like armor. Lucia pulled the sheet tighter around herself as she sat up. Her hair tumbled over her shoulders, untamed, defiant. He glanced once, then looked away, sliding a mug across the counter toward her. "Drink," he said simply. "You'll need it." She lifted the cup but did not drink, her gaze lingering on him. He read the financial section of the paper as if the world weren't shifting beneath their feet. Breakfast was an exercise in silence. She buttered her toast too deliberately. He folded his paper too crisply. Every scrape of cutlery felt amplified, filled with unsaid things. And yet, beneath the silence, tension hummed. By noon the suite felt smaller than it was. Every corner hummed with his presence. She paced restless. The steady rush of water carried from the bathroom, Gerald's shower a low, constant murmur. Steam drifted through the crack in the door, carrying the faint, clean scent of soap. Lucia stilled, pulse betraying her. She imagined him there, water sliding across skin, control stripped bare by nothing but heat. When the water stopped, she turned quickly, pretending interest in her phone. He emerged minutes later, damp hair slicked back. Shirt clinging faintly where water lingered. His eyes caught hers, sharp and knowing. Neither spoke. But the air shifted, thickened. Takeout arrived in paper cartons, a stark contrast to last night's silver trays. They ate with chopsticks, seated at opposite ends of the table like wary adversaries. But silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of glances that lingered. Full of touches avoided but remembered. Full of words neither dared to speak. At one point, Gerald's phone buzzed. He checked it, expression hardening. Something about the way his shoulders stiffened told her trouble was close. She asked softly. He gave her nothing. So she smiled instead, a sharp edge to it. Always the stoic statue, Gerald. Careful, someone might mistake you for human. His gaze snapped to hers, unreadable. And then, for one fleeting moment, it wasn't guarded at all. "You'd be surprised," he murmured. Her heart stuttered. And the silence that followed was no longer safe. As evening drew long shadows across the suite, the first letter arrived. Lucia found it tucked under the suite door. The envelope plain white. Her name scrawled in jagged ink. No return address. No seal. Her stomach tightened before she even opened it. On the envelope, a bold print read, "No matter how high you build your walls, your life must come tumbling." But Gerald crossed the room in 2 long strides, snatching it from her hand. He ripped it open with a sharp motion. His eyes scanning. His face tightening. "What is it?" she demanded. His jaw worked, the muscle ticking as he folded the page and slid it into his jacket. "Nothing you need to worry about." Lucia's pulse throbbed in her throat. "Don't lie to me." He turned to face her fully, his body radiating danger. "I'm not lying. I'm protecting you." Her voice cracked sharper than she intended. "I don't need protection from the truth." Something flickered across his expression then, regret. Maybe, but it vanished beneath the stone mask. He walked to the window, his broad frame blocking out the city skyline. Silence. Thick. Crushing. And then softer. "You're safer not knowing." But she had seen the way his hand clenched the page. She knew whatever it said, it was personal. By late evening the suite was compromised. Gerald made the call without discussion. "Pack light," he ordered, already moving with ruthless efficiency. Lucia bristled. "You don't give orders in my life." He paused, gray eyes pinning her, sharp enough to slice. "When your life is in danger, I do." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of luggage zipping. She shoved clothes into a bag with too much force, every fold an act of defiance. Gerald moved like a shadow. Controlled. Precise. His presence filling every corner of the room. They left through a service exit, escorted by silence and tension. They drove in an anonymous saloon to a decoy hotel. The hotel was smaller, less polished, with dim corridors and muted carpets. Inside the room, Gerald swept the space like a soldier on patrol, checking locks, windows, shadows. Lucia sat on the bed, arms crossed, glaring at him. "You can cage me in 1,000 rooms, Gerald. It doesn't change the fact that you're hiding something. He turned slowly, his gaze meeting hers. For once he didn't deflect. You're right, he admitted. His voice was low, roughened. But I'd rather you hate me than see the danger closing in. Her breath caught, not because of his words but because of the way he looked at her when he said them. She had noticed a lot of things in him, and the room was small. Too small. Every movement brought them close. His arm brushing hers as he adjusted the blinds. His shoulder nearly grazing her when he crossed to the dresser. By night, the tension had stretched so taut it hummed. Lucia sat on the bed, scrolling her phone, pretending calm. Gerald leaned against the wall, watching shadows outside the window. Then the power flickered. The room plunged into temporary darkness, broken only by the city glow beyond the glass. Her pulse jumped. What was that? Backup grid, he said, steady, calm. Too calm. He moved closer instinctively, standing near her as if shielding her from the dark itself. And in the hush that followed, his hand brushed hers. Not by accident. Not entirely. She looked up. Their eyes locked. Suddenly the kiss happened before either could name it. Heart-searing, desperate. His hand slid to her waist, pulling her against him, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that felt dangerous. She clung to him, heat flooding through her. The fire she denied igniting at last. And then clarity. Lucia shoved lightly against his chest, breaking free. Her breath came ragged, her lips tingling. No, she whispered, her voice trembling between fury and longing. This was a mistake. Gerald stood frozen, chest heaving, his hand curling into a fist as if holding himself back. You're right, he said, his voice hoarse. It shouldn't happen again. But the look in his eyes betrayed him. And she knew, their war had just entered dangerous territory. The days blurred together in that decoy hotel, each one heavy with tension. Breakfasts were a battlefield. Gerald pouring her coffee without asking. Lucia responding with silence sharp enough to cut. He read the paper too intently. She stirred sugar into her cup with unnecessary precision. Showers became unbearable, steam curling under the door, the faint sound of water striking skin she couldn't stop imagining. She hated herself for pausing in the hall, for listening longer than she should. Dinners were quiet wars, wine glasses half drained, each glance across the table longer than either intended. Every ordinary moment was charged. The brush of shoulders as they moved around each other. The way his gaze lingered when she tucked her hair back. The way she noticed his tie was always perfectly knotted, his hands always steady, until they brushed hers. It was torture. Slow, exquisite torture. Then the second letter arrived. This one wasn't slipped under the door. It was waiting on the bed when they returned from a staged dinner outing, their laughter forced for the cameras. Gerald grabbed it first, tearing it open. His face hardened. Lucia stepped forward, defiance sparking. Read it to me. Now. He didn't. Instead, he crumpled it in his fist and strode to the bathroom, slamming the door shut. Lucia stood frozen in the silence, her chest pounding. Something inside her cracked then. Because this wasn't just business. Because Gerald wasn't just a bodyguard. Because beneath every secret he kept, she saw a man who was terrified, not of threats, but of her. And that terrified her more than any letter ever could. The summons came the next morning. Gerald's phone buzzed first, a private channel. One Lucia had never seen him answer so quickly. He listened, face carved in stone, then ended the call with a clipped, "We'll be there." Lucia narrowed her eyes from across the room. Who was that? Your father, Gerald replied. He wants to see you. Now. Her stomach sank. Her father never asked. He commanded. And when he summoned her to the mansion, it was never good. The drive was long, the city giving way to rolling iron gates and manicured lawns that stretched for acres. Gerald's hand rested near the gearshift, steady, controlled, but his eyes flicked to the mirrors too often, scanning for tails. Lucia sat rigid in the passenger seat, arms folded tight, pretending the knots in her stomach weren't there. You could at least tell me what this is about, she muttered. Gerald's jaw flexed. You already know. The D'Amato mansion loomed like a fortress of marble and glass. Armed guards patrolled discreetly, their presence just visible enough to remind visitors of the power that resided within. Her father was waiting in the study, flanked by advisors who blended into the shadows. He didn't rise as Lucia entered, merely gestured toward the chair opposite his vast oak desk. Gerald lingered by the door, silent, watchful. "Lucia." Her father's voice carried the weight of a gavel. "You understand the danger has escalated." She lifted her chin. "I understand someone is making threats. What I don't understand is why you think marrying your bodyguard can't solve them." A murmur rippled through the shadows. Her father leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Because appearances, my dear, are not decoration. They are armor. With Gerald at your side, legally, publicly, permanently, you become untouchable. A united front. No one dares strike a woman who belongs to a man like him." The words hit like chains snapping shut. Lucia's throat tightened. "Belongs? You're talking about me like I'm property?" "You are my heir," her father corrected smoothly. "And an heir without protection is worthless." Her breath faltered. Rage flared. She turned her gaze toward Gerald, searching for something. Agreement? Reassurance? But Gerald's expression was unreadable, carved into restraint. Her father rose at last, walking around the desk, his hand heavy on her shoulder. "Lucia, listen to me. You are in real danger. There are people who would rather see you dead than see you inherit this empire. Gerald is not merely a shield. He is the only one I trust to keep you alive long enough to take your place." Lucia swallowed hard, her pulse hammering. Her father's cologne, sharp, authoritative, clung to her senses, pressing the weight of duty against her. She wanted to scream, to run, to throw the entire empire back at him and vanish into a life of anonymity. But then her gaze flicked to Gerald. He stood straight, broad shoulders squared, gray eyes dark as storm clouds. He was silent, but his silence wasn't empty. It was full of something heavy, conflicted, unspoken. And in that moment she understood. He hated this as much as she did. Her father's voice cut through her thoughts. "You will marry him, Lucia. Not for love. For survival. For legacy. For me." Her heart twisted at the command, the inevitability of it. She looked back at Gerald. His eyes caught hers, and for a fleeting second she saw something he couldn't hide. Not dominance. Not strategy. But something raw. Something that scared her more than her father's threats. Because if her father was right, this wasn't just survival. It was surrender. The drive back was suffocating. Lucia stared out the window, her reflection fractured in the glass. She felt Gerald's gaze flick toward her, felt the weight of his silence. Finally she broke it. "Do you agree with him? That marrying you is the only way?" Gerald's hands tightened on the wheel. His voice was low, rough. "I think your father would move heaven and earth to keep you safe. And if that means binding you to me, then yes, he'll force it." Her chest burned. "That's not an answer." He exhaled, the sound strained, heavy. "My answer doesn't matter. His will does." Lucia turned away, anger and something else twisting inside her. Something dangerous. Because beneath the fury, beneath the fear, one truth unsettled her most. She wasn't sure anymore if it was only her father compelling her, or if part of her wanted the chains.